Well, here we are. We've got the president's job approval rating somewhere in the mid 50% range. We've got the Virginia governorship race underway that looks as though it's going to go to the out party of the presidency. In New Jersey, we've got the closest governor's race in a long time, maybe in history. Welcome to October 1981. Reagan's job approval rating was 57%, Obama 55%. In 1981, Chuck Robb and the Democrats swept the Virginia races that were at stake, including the governorship, to which Democrats said, "Hallelujah, all is not lost." In 1981, the New Jersey governor's race was the closest in history, and Tom Kean, the Republican, beat Jim Florio by 1,800 votes. History is repeating itself. No, it's not. The Reagan era, which was in full swing in 1981, could be best characterized as being un-young, un-poor, and un-black. That was the real majority. Put another way, white, middle class, middle age, suburban, married, mom, dad, kids. Reagan grasped that vision very well. And that vision was not just something that he grasped, but it was portrayed over and over again in the popular culture, whether it was Leave It to Beaver in the 1960s or The Cosby Show in the 1980s. Democrats didn't do well when that real majority was un-young, un-poor, and un-black. How badly? Well, we know the record, but just bear with me on two statistics. Democrats won 50% of the vote only twice since 1970. And that was Jimmy Carter in 1976 and Obama in 2008. Not Bill Clinton, not Harry Truman, not John F. Kennedy. And if you go back further, only FDR, LBJ, Carter, and Obama have exceeded the 50% mark. I think the real majority, that un-young, un-poor, un-black majority, worked really well for the Republican Party. And it worked well because Democrats succeeded. Think of that for a moment. The New Deal was geared to a nation that was one-third ill-clad, ill-housed, ill-nourished, as Roosevelt told us in 1937. In short, there was work to do, and that work was successful, so that by 1980, we had a relatively prosperous, middle-class, suburban country that wasn't worried about what government ought to be doing for them, but saw themselves as the proprietors of government that taxed too much, spent too much, put on the green eye shades of government. And of course, Ronald Reagan is such a good example of that journey, if you will, from New Deal Democrat as he was to expounding a Reagan revolution. Well, the real majority is over. It's over. 3 big revolutions are happening in the United States today. First, we've got a new demography that's upending that majority, and that revolution is a racial revolution. When the real majority was in full swing, 9 out of 10 voters in this country were white. In 2004, that was 77% of the electorate, which is one of the reasons why I told my friend Mark Shields, watch that number. It's declining. And of course, it declined even more in 2008 to 74%, partly because we had a first African-American run for president in Barack Obama, but that number was going to decline anyway. Why? Because by 2042, whites are going to be a minority throughout the United States by 2042. The Census Bureau a few years ago estimated 2050. They revamped that estimation now to 2042. And as a parent of a 12-year-old, I think about what country she is living in, and I see it already in the schools that she goes to. Because in her schools, she is a minority, being white. What's going on? Immigration is going on. We have more foreign-born living in the state of California today than there are people in New Jersey. Okay? There are more foreign-born in New York State than there are people in South Carolina. So, and these are big states. We're not talking about little states here. Latinos now outnumber in many places African Americans. In Fairfax County, Virginia, we crossed a threshold where Latinos are the leading minority group. And we think that by 2050, they will be 29% of the total population in the United States. The old black-white dichotomy, the ways we thought about race in terms of black and white, that's over. And that's coming to an end. Population trends, immigration, that's taking care of it, but it's also something else, interracial marriage. I grew up in the 1950s and 1960s, and I remember one day when Time magazine came in our mailbox and there was a picture of the daughter of the Secretary of State, Dean Rusk, marrying a black man. That was extraordinarily controversial, and that happened just a few months after the Loving versus Virginia case, which I describe at great length in the book. If we fast forward to 2004, here's the son of the president, a nephew of the president, George P. Bush, son of the Florida governor, Hispanic, biracial, marrying a white woman in Maine. Interestingly, actually, it's an interesting story because the race of George P. Bush and his wife, so far as I could tell, she is white, was never, ever mentioned in any of the news reports. But the Portland Sunday Telegram in Maine actually ran an editorial noticing that the state was 97% white and that the children in the state, because of that lack of demographic diversity, were missing out on something important. 4 in 10 teenagers in this country have dated someone of a different race, not the Irish boy dating the Italian girl, okay? 3 in 10 say these are serious relationships. Interracial marriage has exploded in the United States today. And Barack Obama got it. Barack Obama understood in 2008 that his race was not a liability, it was an asset in this new demographic environment. He said, I think if you tell people we have a president in the White House who still has a grandmother living in a hut on the shores of Lake Victoria and has a sister who is half Indonesian married to a Chinese Canadian, right, then they're going to think that he may have a better sense of what's going on in our lives and our country. And he'd be right. He was right. There's an old saying that demography is destiny. This racial revolution is huge. And one of the things as I wrote the book was I realized it was big, but I didn't realize just how big it really was until you pour through the numbers, but also pour through the different stories that people have as they're bringing to the table now, and that it's everywhere. This is not a California revolution or a New York revolution. This is a revolution that's happening in Iowa and in Kansas and in places we don't think of where, again, huge amount of immigration and interracial marriage and all the rest is changing our country.